My father always used to sum up the history or describe the history of the Filipino people in one word: tadhana, Filipino, for history or destiny.
We need leaders who understand the importance of harmony. And since we have an aficionado of music in our midst, and a practitioner for music, President Marcos, right to the ears, Buong Marcos, as he's popularly known, that is why I'm going to use a lot of musical metaphors in my speech. So we need leaders who can understand that delicate musical balance, which can amplify the tiniest of sovereign voices, raise them, not drown them out, and make them heard loud and clear. It is therefore my distinct privilege today to welcome a statesman who practices this equilibrium, His Excellency, President of the Republic of Philippines.
As President of the Philippines, Asia's oldest republic, it is indeed an honor to visit the world's largest democracy. For instance, the complex issue of competing claims in the South China Sea has for years been unfortunately and simplistically reduced to the South China Sea disputes, as if claims were all equal. They are not.
Yes. President, if I can invite you from that side, and Mr. Joshi, you can join us from here. Thank you so much. If I can request everyone to please take their seats. We'll commence the evening with a welcome address by Mr. Sanjoy Joshi, Chairman at the Observer Research Foundation. Sir.
Excellency Ferdinand Romualdo Marcos Jr., President of the Philippines, and we're very pleased to have First Lady Madame Louis Arneta Marcos with us today. Ministers in our midst, delegates, part of the delegation of Philippines, dignitaries and experts from the strategic community, a very warm welcome to all of you. We gather here today as the Indo-Pacific braces for yet another realignment, perhaps its most profound since the end of the Second World War. The certainties of the past have dissolved. Supply chains are looking very, very brittle from what they did 10 years ago. And the very foundations of the rules-based system painstakingly built over the debris of the Second World War, those foundations are being tested by the tides of geopolitics. As a constant, within the traditional Indian worldview, you would call a time like this a time when the Pacific and the Indian Oceans are undergoing what we say is a Samudra Mantham, a process of churn, the big churn. And these are also, in the traditional Indian way of thinking, these are moments of creative destruction. Times when the world needs very skilled navigators who understand the importance of balance, leaders who can recognize and reject the false binaries which surround us everywhere, who understand the difference between development and sovereignty, and reject the false binaries between the East and the West, the North and the South. We need leaders who understand the importance of harmony. And since we have an aficionado of music in our midst, and a practitioner for music, President Marcos, right to the ears, Buong Marcos, as he's popularly known, that is why I'm going to use a lot of musical metaphors in my speech. So we need leaders who can understand that delicate musical balance, which can amplify the tiniest of sovereign voices, raise them, not drown them out, and make them heard loud and clear. It is therefore my distinct privilege today to welcome a statesman who practices this equilibrium, His Excellency, President of the Republic of Philippines. So in your State of the Nation address last Monday, you clearly spelled out that Philippines' foreign policy as an independent nation and a country that is a friend to all and an enemy to none. And for India and the Philippines, as Prime Minister Modi remarked, we are friends by choice and partners by destiny. As maritime democracies straddling Asia's most critical oceans, the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, yes, geography is our destiny. Yet our greatest shared challenge transcends the territorial disputes in our neighborhoods. The bigger challenge is not those. The bigger challenge is the erosion of trust. The erosion of trust in multilateral institutions which set down the rules, the laws. Both our nations face unprecedented pressure on our maritime domains, whether at Scarborough Shoal or across the Andaman Sea. Yet our response must transcend reactive nationalism. The Philippines' unwavering adherence to the 2016 arbitral award under UNCLOS and India's principal support demonstrates how law must anchor power. A principle ASEAN has championed for generations. And today's address, shifting Indo-Pacific ties, Philippines and India as cross-sea partners for a rules-based order, speaks to the very heart of our shared challenge. Now, His Excellency arrives here, yes, as the President of Philippines, but more importantly, Philippines is today getting ready to take over the presidency of ASEAN in 2026 and becomes the steward of ASEAN centrality. And this is, I think, a time when ASEAN itself, that very understated force in the region, actually remains the best hope for rebuilding a fractured international order. As China recalibrates its ambitions, US commitments fluctuate, ASEAN retains the indispensable convening power born out of neutrality that certainly is not passivity. But rather it is one of those strategic fora where I think norms for the future can perhaps be reforged. And under President Marcos' stewardship, the 2026 chairmanship offers at this point of time a historic moment to recenter multilateralism. Yesterday, just a day after the Indian and the Philippines Navy concluded 2 days of joint exercises near the Scarborough Shoal, the two countries signed a slew of agreements, including a declaration of establishing a strategic partnership. Ours is not just a rapidly evolving bilateral relationship, but a partnership that believes in architecting a polycentric regional order where middle powers like ours sustain balance. Now, how can India and Philippines work together to rebuild the cross-sea equilibrium? Very important. So our defense and security collaborations, whether it is the exercises or the BrahMos missile deal, they aren't just about defense capability, but they are symbols more of sovereign choice, where one can become a trusted partner of the other, and each exercises strategic agency beyond traditional patrons. This is the ASEAN way, diversification seen as resilience. And a maritime cooperation near the Scarborough Shoal also is more about confidence building within ASEAN's normative framework for peace and stability. And the next question is, can ASEAN's FTAs, India's new trade pacts, form the scaffolding for a rules-based resilience as tariff walls erode the established economic order? So you lead a nation at the fulcrum of the Indo-Pacific, and lead it with the wisdom to know that lasting security comes not from dominance, but from balance. And that power, if power is checked, rules are upheld, and the smallest voice retains its dignity in the concert of nations, we have done something good. I recall, sir, you had shortly after assuming office an interview with the Straits Times likened the Philippines' foreign policy to a band where every instrument matters and where you need the bass player to anchor, not to dominate. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to invite President Bongbong Marcos, a leader whose attitude mirrors that deep, essential musical ethos, deep, steady, essential, and one who knows that in geopolitics, as in jazz, what goes unsupported collapses. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Chairman Sanjoy Joshi, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The First Lady and I are elated to be visiting this great country, a close friend and vital partner of the Philippines, upon the gracious invitation of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. As President of the Philippines, Asia's oldest republic, it is indeed an honor to visit the world's largest democracy. Before I proceed, allow me to express my deepest sympathy to the Indian nation, especially to those bereaved who lost loved ones in the tragic flash floods in Uttarakhand yesterday. Over the past 2 days, I paid my respects to the Mahatma, father of this nation, whose powerful ideas continue to resonate the world over and continue to guide our lives. I had insightful discussions with your president and, of course, with Prime Minister Modi and other eminent officials. I reiterated to them our abiding support and solidarity in confronting terrorism and our grief over innocent lives lost to this scourge. We discussed our cooperation in defense and security, and more importantly, we charted the direction of our future-looking engagement. I explored with the captains of Indian businesses a path towards mutual growth in what is, by many measures, still very much a blue ocean of opportunities between the Philippines and India. Through the Indian media, I engaged in conversation with the broader public on their perceptions and queries on the rising prominence and relevance of our ties. From tomorrow, our sojourn takes us to India's Garden City and the Silicon Valley of Bengaluru to further our economic agenda. This opportunity to share further reflections is the most fitting way to conclude the Delhi leg of this visit. On the centuries-old and enduring friendship of the Philippines and the Indian peoples, the state of our Indo-Pacific region, and its complex challenges and uncertainties against which we must, as nations and as partners, propel forward. I therefore wholeheartedly thank Chair Joshi and ORF for hosting us for this gathering this evening. Friends, this state visit is occasioned by our commemoration of 75 years of diplomatic relations. Yet, the ties that bind our two nations extend much further back in time. Our histories are intertwined. Southeast Asia is India's next-door neighbor, but the Philippine archipelago lies at its far end, bordering on the Pacific. And yet, our civilizations bridge this chasm. Despite this distance, the Philippines archipelago was touched by the Indosphere. More than artifacts, this influence was of the intangible kind, ideas that seeped into our worldview. A Maranao version of the Ramayana called the Maharaja Lawana, and Sanskrit-derived words that to this day roll off Filipino tongues. The British occupation of Manila lasted all but 18 months, but that expedition's Madras infantrymen stayed behind. They are progenitors of a vibrant circle of Filipino-Indian families in Metro Manila's eastern reaches. And speaking of linguistic influences, my father always used to sum up the history or describe the history of the Filipino people in one word: tadhana, Filipino for history or destiny. Auspiciously, it is believed to be related, if not rooted, in the Sanskrit sandhana, a term that denotes both journey and unity. Both sandhana and tadhana, a shared journey and destiny, capture the story of the friendship between our two countries. We see this in our similar experiences as peoples that went through colonial subjugation and through tenacious struggles won independence. It was there when Philippines and India, at the very infancy of our statehoods, became two of only 3 Asian nations in San Francisco that labored to establish the United Nations. This journey and vision imbued the pivotal conferences in New Delhi in 1947 and Baguio in 1950 to forge our pan-Asian solidarity. And 5 years later, we converged in Bandung to define the rallying creed of the Global South. The Cold War would see our strategic outlooks diverge as we acted on our respective realities and security environments. The Philippines found security in alliances, while India chose the path of non-alignment. In that extended period, we embarked on our parallel and respective paths towards attaining our national aspirations and cultivating our international standing. Today, in a far different and indisputably multimodal world, our respective journeys converge once again. We remain bastions of democracy, but this time, we are also amongst the most ascendant economies. The Philippines is on the cusp of upper middle income status, attainable as early as next year. India, of course, can be proud of your spectacular rise under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi and the intellectual gravitas, innate talent, and industry of Indian people, rising to become the world's fourth largest economy and the country wielding enormous global influence. As an emerging middle power, the Philippines is likewise determined to be a force for good. What has this meant for our ties? A reconvergence, one of such proportions that the Philippines and India are interacting, collaborating at levels and scopes not seen before. Since 2023, our trade has breached and consistently exceeded the $3 billion mark. Our functional and development cooperation has turned multifaceted, spanning health, tourism, agriculture, financial technology, science and technology, education, maritime security, even space. We now reinforce each other's strengths very concretely by our defense cooperation, of which the BrahMos project is by far the largest. But this intensification is not confined to supporting bilateral aspirations. Our mutually supportive approaches also find expression in cooperation on shared geopolitical and geo-economic challenges. It is the same reconvergence and alignment of interest that led Prime Minister Modi and me to Hyderabad House yesterday to inaugurate the Philippines-India Strategic Partnership. There may be an impression in some circles that strategic partnerships have become common currency in international diplomacy and national toolkits. Not so for the Philippines. We approach the forging of such relationships with great deliberation, less of caution, but more of adherence to a very high standard. The standards that uphold mutual and strategic trust, a common cause, a clear alignment of interests, and indeed a track record of being responsible players in the international arena and the global commons. Well, India has emerged as one of the countries with the Philippines, which the Philippines finds these sterling qualities. Our strategic partnership with India is only our fifth such partnership. After Japan, Vietnam, Australia, and the Republic of Korea, sea lines of communications crisscross the Indian Ocean. Maritime trade to and from the Far East and the Pacific through the Indian Ocean has and continues to underpin our prosperity and our people's aspirations for the last centuries. Safe navigation and security are important, especially for Filipino and Indian seafarers who are on almost every ship plying these historic and strategic routes. I again thank the Indian people and the brave men and women of the Navy, of your Navy through Prime Minister Modi, for the kind rescue and succor of our nationals in 2024, after they were attacked by Houthi rebels. We recognize India's influence and first responder role in this critical area. We welcome our new strategic partner, India, then a crown jewel for an empire, and now the key to unlock a free and open Indo-Pacific. As two of Asia's biggest democracies with a deep historical linkage, the Philippines and India should transform our natural friendship into a robust and modern partnership. This is but the natural progression of things. Just yesterday, a flotilla of 3 ships from India's Eastern Naval Command, including the guided missile destroyer INS Delhi, accompanied by tankers INS Shakti and corvette INS Kiltan, joined 2 frigates from the Philippines, BRP Miguel Malvar and BRP Jose Rizal, and completed their first ever maritime cooperative activities in the South China Sea and in the West Philippine Sea. It attests to our shared determination to work for the greater good in a way that protects our trade and our prosperity, our freedoms, and the heritage for future generations. Our relations with India form part of a larger latticework of partnerships, a formal alliance, strategic partnership, a minilateral groupings that we have built in recent years with and amongst the states that share specific interests. All these build into pillars that support the architecture of regional stability and guarantee the preservation of prosperity. They reflect the value that we put in investing in diplomacy, even as we steadily ramp up and modernize our defense capabilities, undergirded by our comprehensive archipelagic defense concept to project our forces into areas where we must, by constitutional duty and legal right, and we must protect our interests and preserve our patrimony. These we all pursue, even as we remain true to our commitment to ASEAN, to its centrality, its convening power, and proven positive impact in shaping regional peace and prosperity for close to 6 decades now. India takes a similar, albeit uniquely and necessarily Indian approach, with its pragmatism and pursuit of optimization of relationships via multi-aligned, multi-vector policies in its foreign relations. Indeed, our strategic partnership reflects the growing convergence of our long-term interests in the context of the historic shifts that will inform the ebb and flow of this century. In this 10th year of India's impactful Act East policy, that grew out of the Look East policy, the Philippines has also turned its gaze towards India, and our visions is met. Friends, at the United Nations in 2022, I defined the transcendent challenges facing the global community: widening geopolitical polarities that threaten our hard-won peace, unresolved inequities and inequalities, powerful technologies with the power to transform, but also with the danger of destabilizing our political and social order, and the existential threat of climate change. Despite resounding calls, global unity to address these challenges have, unfortunately, become even more elusive. In the 3 years since then, geopolitical developments have exerted only greater pressure upon the very structures and norms designed to prevent and to resolve conflicts, facilitate trade-driven growth and economic integration, or urge forward collective global action. We see all these in our very own shared neighborhood of the Indo-Pacific, the locus of our hopes, growth, and a very existence. In Singapore last year, I described the realities impinging upon the region's present and future. A multipolar world being shaped by the experiences, aspirations, and agency of nations, and challenged by attempts to undermine prevailing international norms. Within this multipolar world, the impact of continuing strategic competition amongst the great powers, which permeates the evolving regional landscape and creates dilemmas that weigh on the strategic choices of regional states. The abiding relevance of ASEAN in holding the center amidst this fluidity, even as ASEAN's centrality and cohesion are under siege. The role of bridge builder nations in forging decisive multilateral actions and solutions, even as geopolitics seeps into the infrastructure of global governance. The vital importance of securing and keeping global commons free, open, and accessible for the rightful benefit of everyone. The urgent need for action on climate change, whose impact and worsening threat are very much felt by our region. And finally, the world and our region must be able to seize maximum gains from the transformative power of advanced technologies, while paying due attention to their disruptive potential. Ladies and gentlemen, the responses to these realities are equally manifold. Of the many potent prescriptions, the Philippines has long stressed shoring up the rules-based order to be crucial, and this for 4 reasons. First, it is the best guarantee for the sovereign equality of all states, regardless of size. Secondly, the predictability and stability that it engenders provides an enabling environment for all states to pursue their respective aspirations. Third, it provides a credible legal regime that guarantees just and equitable access by all states to the global commons and to all frontiers that could lead to sustainable development. Fourth, it enables states to galvanize effective international action to confront challenges that any single nation could not successfully manage on its own. Yet some of our fellow defenders of the international system that we built together in 1945 have since shifted their priorities, turning more inward and prioritizing urgent national concerns at times at the expense of the principles we used to champion collectively. Meanwhile, other powers are seeking to take advantage of this shift. Unfortunately, such narratives at times dominate, obscuring the international community's judgment. For instance, the complex issue of competing claims in the South China Sea has for years been unfortunately and simplistically reduced to the South China Sea disputes, as if claims were all equal. They are not. The assertions of literal states have to pass the test of conformity with international law, particularly the UNCLOS and definitive binding interpretations such as the 2016 arbitral award. Such misinformation or inaccurate narratives distract us from calling out illegal and unlawful actions for what they are, violations of international law. Indeed, there are those who sometimes justify such provocations under the pretext of geopolitics. Just as disconcertingly, there are those who seek to discredit international legal procedures and dismiss binding rulings to cloak opaque claims with a semblance of legitimacy. It has thus become the responsibility for all stakeholders, including the Philippines and India, to play a more active role in upholding, in defending, and in preserving our rules-based order. The Indian vision for multipolarity, which resonates with the Philippines, that emphasis on strategic agency, is no longer just an aspiration, it is an exigency. These are the moorings upon which we must anchor our strategic partnership going forward. Through our strategic partnership, the Philippines and India must assert the clarity of international law. As co-architects of the rules-based international order, we have a solid foundation on which we can build. We Filipinos are proud of our efforts to promote the rule of law, including through the 1982 Manila Declaration, the peaceful settlement of disputes.